Welcome back, everyone, to Startup Security Weekly. Paul and Michael are here to talk about the startup. We're going to do some listener feedback, and then we're going to talk about some startup stories and news articles as well. I don't have any articles this week, Michael, but you seem to have everything pretty well fleshed out.
I got you covered, brother. Yeah,
hey,
I'm there for you, man.
Thank you. I was actually presenting at as I mentioned earlier, I was presenting this week, so I lost a lot of time to prepping my slides and traveling to give a presentation, but it was well worth it as the presentation went well, it was well received, and I briefly got to see people before I had to head back to the studio.
And tell everybody what your title was. I love it.
Everything I need to know about security, I learned from watching Kung Fu movies. Yes.
I'm going to have a new talk now. Everything I need to know about security, I learned from Paul talking about Kung Fu movies.
There you go. That'd be awesome.
That's what I'm going to do. InfoSec World, I'm going to do that one.
I had 16 points or facts that I drew from Kung Fu movies, and I related every one of them to security. And I was nervous about being able to pull that off. So far, so good. I'll go back and make some tweaks. And you mentioned InfoSec World. That's actually the next time I will be giving that talk is at InfoSec World. So,
well, I look forward to it. You know, it's if we were Facebook friends, I just put up a picture today. It's got 9 different martial artists. I said, which 3 would you choose on your team? You'd have to be like, we got to expand the box. I can give you more, but that's
yeah. But what problem are you trying to solve, Michael? What are the goals?
Ass kicking. In fact,
that's a very general statement.
Yes. Somebody said Chuck Norris is on there. I choose Chuck. Don't care about the rest. I was like, all right, you win.
Yes.
All right, we're good here. We're solid. So here's the feedback. I love this, by the way. People are getting chatty with those. So this one came into me. It was an email, and I'll just read it. So Matt wrote in. I left his last name off, but he said he got inspired watching us during episode 14, and we were talking about investors, and we were talking about customers and investors, and Tyler just talked about that with us again. So here's what Matt said, and this is in the show notes. Customers are your number one investor. When you have an investor as a startup, what do you use that money for? R&D, asset purchases, rent, maybe some salary. You treat those investors like gold. But here's the thing. Once you're running and you're making sales, then that revenue does all of that, and hopefully the founders get some money back. So the bottom line, the revenue pays the same sort of operating costs as CapEx and OpEx that the investor money pays. So treat your customers like gold. And if you give them that same feeling as investors, you will grow the business. And I agree. But I like the fact that he took some time to think about that and give us back those benefits. What do you think?
I could be completely wrong on this, and I think it depends on the situation that you're in with a startup. I'll liken it to our situation in offensive countermeasures and kind of our strategy that I think in general applies to bootstrapped startups, maybe in security. I think that you need to take your initial revenue that you get from your early stage customers and focus on product features and research and development, making your product great and solving problems that are in your target market, right? That's the first critical thing. The second thing that I'm learning, and I have to be honest, I underestimated this, and this is something that is hard that I'm focusing on right now, in fact, and that is, I think the second, I don't know, we even put it second, I put this first, is using some of that initial revenue and your initial effort into customer service and just being outstanding at customer service. And I mean, that's going to carry forward until the end of time for your company. But I have learned from this show and reading and the resources Michael has provided in the show and our guests, how important, I've rediscovered how important that customer service is when you're in an early stage startup. So that is somewhat of a new focus for me and a priority. And I think it's something that everyone agrees with as I drew from the collective that we've had on the show up to this point in episode 17.
Yeah, let me add on that, though, too, because I think I shared with everybody before, when I started the first cohort of the Straight Talk Leadership Experience, and we might change that name again, and that if we don't cover it today, we'll cover it sometime in the future, but, that's when I went, we can make this better if I give private coaching to everybody who's in each of the cohorts.
Right.
And it was fascinating because kind of like where Tyler said, people go, that's stupid, that'll never work. And it'll totally work. In fact, it's been absolutely phenomenal, and it's become one of the number one points. And what's interesting is I'm digging it as much as the people who are working through the program with me. Like I love that level of interaction. I can't imagine operating at that level of an offering without it. So I like investing in customer service early, and then I would almost say, and then do it often. Keep putting it in. Don't lose sight of that, because what I find with a lot of companies is when they start small, they stay hungry, but as they get bigger, they're like, bah, we can get more customers. And I think that's one of the things that's going to give startups an opportunity to set themselves apart. Make that commitment to the customer from day one and keep owning it. And I think it works out really well.
And what I'm kind of trying to figure out is, and I've seen a lot of startups do this differently, when you take your initial round of funding, whether that's an angel investment or an early VC round, Matt brought up the question, like, what do you do with that money? I think that depends on the situation, and it depends on, what is your driver for putting some of that money back into development. You have to have a really good, reason to do that. And if you haven't put the effort and resources into development and customer service, taking some of that money and putting it into development may not be the right choice, because you want to take your initial investments and make sure you're developing the right product features and growth of the product. You can't do that if you're not working very closely with your customers and listening to them and solving the problems for your target market. And I think a lot of people also look at the first round and be like, well, we're going to put it all into growing a sales force.
Right.
And I think you need to include sales and marketing in that as a lump sum. But the balance becomes balancing out your sales and marketing with what your dev team and other areas of the organization can keep up with. So you need account management and the systems and processes to be able to grow the business. To me, that's where you need to balance out your investment, right? And we see this in Shark Tank all the time, right? What are you going to do with the money? And I think more often than not, the people that get the money are like, well, I can get the customers. I just need help in like the production of the product or the handling of the volume that you're anticipating. And I think that's a really good place for a startup to be. And I hope I know we're going to be in that place someday soon. In fact, as of today, we have way too many leads that we can go after with the size that we are. So we have to be very selective as to who we're going to work with.
That's a good problem to have. No, and I think, look, I've started watching Shark Tank now differently, and now I almost watch just to like pick up the interactions and pick up the questions. And I think you just keyed on something that was pretty interesting. I don't see very often where they say, well, what do you need from us? And it's, look, it is sometimes I need the contacts, or I need insights into how to make this part of the process work better. But it's almost never, well, we need the money because like we need to hire a sales force. Like they want to know, right? What's Mark Cuban's first question? Did you sell anything?
Yeah.
What are your sales? In fact, what I love about him is to say, what are your sales? And the most common answer I hear is, well, our total sales to date, like you watch their eyes dart back and forth, our total sales to date are 1.3. He's like, all right, okay, last 12 months, what are your sales? Mm-hmm. Last 3 months, what are your sales? And it's always fascinating to me to watch the people on the show there to pitch the sharks, and they don't know. They're like, well, I can tell you right now, if you get a deal, that's just absolutely amazing to me. And it's not going to be a deal that's necessarily good for you. But those are some of the things that you need to know. And what they're looking for, and we keep talking about this, is it going to fly? If you can show me that it's got traction and it's continuing to get traction, and yes, this money is going to help you solve a problem, or you're going to get to something you didn't currently have, that's great. And I think that's important because as you and I looked at this, and we've had people join us on the show and say, hey, look, man, it's tightening up. It's hard to get seed money today. It's hard. And look, I keep looking at the articles that tell me it's hard to get funded today and it's hard to get your seed today. And I got to tell you, I don't believe them. I think if you have a product and you can differentiate yourself, you're going to be fine. But I think what they want to know is, what problem do you solve? Mm-hmm. Are people willing to pay for it? And how are you doing in customer acquisition? And if I go talk to your last 5 customers, are they happy? Are they going to buy from you again? Would they recommend you to somebody else? If you can tell those stories convincingly, consistently, and honestly, I think you're going to be in really good shape. I'll tell you, I've started to have, and in fact, I've got a new area that I'm going to start looking at, and it's interesting because what we try to do in this program is we try to look at people that are earlier in the they're pre-Series A financing. We'll obviously talk to people that are post A, and we'll talk to people about a lot of different stuff. But what I've started to realize is there's a huge problem in our industry for startups that are post Series A. I had somebody call me last week and say, Michael, most of these companies don't know what their value is, and they're not aligned on it internally, which means they cannot sell externally.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
I think about that for a week and a half. I mean, think about what that means. If you don't know what the value of your company is, if you can't answer the problem you solve, the value that you bring, how to measure it, how you're going to communicate, how you're going to help the organization that's buying it from you, this is why we have 12 and 18-month lead cycles, which if that doesn't make other people stabby like it upsets me, then I'm doing something wrong, because that's nuts.
Another thing that I think is interesting, Michael, that you highlighted was, yeah, it's important to have sales and customers, but I think you don't need an enormous amount of sales and customers, and that's going to be relative to the industry and the product or services that you're selling, but you need to be able to show growth. And I think that's what Mark Cuban's after is you don't need $2 million in sales in the first 6 months in order to get funding. But what I believe he's looking for is, what was the growth? Like, yeah, a year ago, we had 2 customers and this was our revenue. And then, each quarter we grew by X amount until today we've had this. If you can show continuous growth, that's showing that you're onto something, right?
No, I think it's a great point, because again, I watched it the other day, and my son was sitting with me, and we're talking about some of it, and that's exactly, he had a company that came on, and so like if you're selling a product that people are going to use and then it's going to go away, then the logical question is, what's the reorder rate? How many people are reordering? How many are coming? If you're selling something that's more subscription based, how many are maintaining their subscriptions? So what's your net new and what's your retainer level on it? But what I've also seen sometimes is that people in our security space, and I don't like this, maybe I'm wrong, we've had 27 consecutive quarters of 100% growth, EBITDA, blah, blah. Listen, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. Like, stop. That just doesn't, but it does play to what you're talking about in terms of just show me that there's growth. And all I'm pointing out is, don't get technical and fancy with it. I don't care how many quarters. Are you still growing? Is there a demand for what it is that you're trying to do? And are you giving people remarkable value for the investment they're placing in you? Yes? Let's keep talking. Mm-hmm. And I think that works for investors and everybody else. Just don't get fancy with it, right? Talk straight. Not that I'm biased or anything. Right, focus. Hey, let me just point this out real quick, because when a couple of the episodes I've talked to people, say, hey, tell me where you're struggling with this and what's up, and I'll figure out how to solve it. You got a long email from Ben, and I really appreciate this. And what's really kind of cool is there's like an international component to this. Let me just read you this excerpt. I did not put this in the show notes. I said I'd distill it, but I was looking this up real quick. He said, this is the part I can share. I think it's boiled down to a more generic scenario of how do you enable straight talk when one or both sides believe they will either diminish their value proposition or put it at risk. I realize the goal of straight talk is to enable both sides to better understand the shared value of the engagement at a deeper level. So how do I do that? Awesome question. Stay tuned, because I'm gonna go unpack that, and I'm gonna work that through, and I'm probably gonna work with Ben, and we're gonna test some stuff out, and then we'll come back and we'll do that. So here's the question I've been working on with some people lately, and I'm curious if you're out there and you're trying to work on this, and it's relative to startups. What do you do when you wait too long, right? So you've got a startup, you've got the solution. I think we need to do a better job, and I want to find the positive side of this. What's the cost of inaction? What's the cost of delay? Like, I look at friction a lot. If friction builds up, it erodes your value. It increases the cost of connection with the client internally or whatever, slows everything down. These are our projects. We fight for the PO, they kick off, yes! And then 3 weeks later, it's nosediving. That's why. It's friction. It's creeping in. Friction has a cost to it, but we overlook those costs, and we get very transactional. So I want to start talking to people about looking at that and trying to put some numbers around it and understand it better. If you're in that situation, reach out to me, let me know. Or if you've got a different situation with your startup or in your enterprise where you're trying to figure out straight talk, shoot it to me and we'll figure it out. I mean, at some point, Paul, we're gonna have to do some sort of a webinar too and break some stuff down. We've talked about helping people with pitches and stuff. I think we'll figure it out. I want it to be positive. I don't want to tear people down, right? I want to look at helping elevate and amplify things. But I think. So anyway, Ben, thank you. And Matt, thank you. It's good stuff. It's good feedback. And I look forward to more of it.
Awesome. What do we got in the startup news for this week?
Well, I've got one I wanted to ask you about. I mean, we chatted the 6-hour work week or 6-hour work day, but let's circle back to that. Here's one. I wanted your take on this. how startups can use open source software to compete against the big guys. And then what it's talking about is how SMBs can use this because it's talking about using disruption and they can do stuff. Do you agree? I mean, is that? What's your take on it?
I think it depends on the skill level of your employees. You have to weigh that in, their experience and their skill level. Typically, it requires a little more effort and a little more skill to implement open source software. That's not to say that you can't get the same benefit or maybe greater than commercial offerings. John Stratton and I talked about this in Enterprise Security Weekly, and he said, John has always said, look, if you're going to use open source software, that's great. When you go to make the transition to maybe consider a commercial solution, you should be paying for the net between what value you're getting from the open source software and then what additional things you get from the commercial software, not the commercial software as a whole. What you can do with open source without paying for it is one thing. What the commercial product provides on top of that is a completely different thing. I also think that you have to weigh in the time. Typically, it's more time to implement open source software correctly. However, if you can do that, sure, you can absolutely be more competitive in the market because you've got more operating revenue because you're saving some money on software. I mean, that's really what one of the goals is of using open source software, right? Is you're going to have more working capital because you're not dishing out a bunch of money for commercial software.
Yeah, and I think that was the argument to it, and you touched on some of the questions that I normally have, which is, okay, but can you support it? It was kind of like when I went out a number of years ago, people were like, oh, are you going to roll your own laptop, build in Linux? I'm like, no, I don't have time for that. No, I'm going to go with the Mac and make it work. And now that they got the really cool touch bar, I mean, how many did you buy? I know you're really excited about that.
I went opposite. I bought a Linux laptop.
No, I was teasing you.
Bought a Linux laptop.
Let's go back to the 6-hour workday because I like this. I've been a big kick lately on looking at focus, looking at deep work and stuff like that. And I keep promising people around me that I'm going to try to work less. So here's the article. What they say: let's get away with the 9 to 5. Let's do 6-hour workdays. But here's what they described: let's cut out the fluff. Let's cut out the wasted meetings and the breaks and the extra long lunches. What if you just said to people, hey, let's get it done, 6 hours, go home, live your life. Thank you. I'll tell you what, I like it conceptually, but here's the thing I like best about it, and here's how they would implement it. They said focus on outputs and make achieving results the mantra. There's a movement called results-oriented workplace. ROW, I think, is results, whatever. So anyway, the idea is, look, I'm not going to count your hours. Here's what needs to get accomplished. We're all on the same page. We're going to pull pretty hard on it. And if you've got a sick kid, you got to take some time off. That's good. You're feeling burnt out. It's a Thursday. You want to go get an ice cream cone? Go get an ice cream cone and have it. It's kind of cool. And their point is, look, focus on getting stuff done, get the right stuff done. Don't focus on hours. And I like this because what we keep talking about is let's get out of the transactional mindset. Let's get into the value-based mindset. Now it's easy for me to say because even right now, right, I'm a party of one with a couple folks I partner with. We're gonna change that, and my intention is to do the same thing. Like it's to say, hey, get your job done. Don't really care. Let's work when it works for you. Yeah, you run a different business. How would this work for you guys?
I think that's really the only way to run a business. I don't even think it's anything really all that new either. And I think that I encourage colleges and universities to instill that upon students so that when they get to the workplace, they can easily adapt, or maybe there's no adapting that needs to happen at all, that's just where they're comfortable working in. And I think mentoring people before they get into the workplace, that's how it's going to work, and instilling some discipline is huge. And, like I said, I don't think it's anything new.
You know what I like about it though, and let me just you've given me an idea for my own content. I keep telling people about layers, not levels. And the first layer is the individual layer. I like what you're talking about. As an individual, you need to be willing to go into a kind of environment that says, you don't have to hold my hand, you don't have to script every hour for me. Tell me what needs to get done, empower me to do it, and hey, I'll go get it done. And I think then that means if we hire the right people, we can get that done the right way. All right, I put some up about ideas and things that we can have in it, but based on something said, I want to go through this one. how to de-risk a startup. So the idea is, and this has got a ton of stuff in it. It's really good. And one of the things when I shared this article out earlier this week that I put out there was, this is good if you're in security today in your enterprise. This is why we keep talking about startup mindset on this program. You're in security today. Two things you need to embrace right now. You're acting like a startup, whether you like it or not, and you're selling, whether you like it or not. So you've got to go convince the rest of the organization that they might need to do something different, that you might need to change the structure of the status quo and act in a particular way. The natural reaction to that is no. That's the natural reaction. And so the idea here is this lays out that it's got a whole spectrum of risk and a whole bunch of ways in order to de-risk the startup. And that's exactly what Tyler was talking about in terms of, okay, you're a startup, you're trying to get some traction in the enterprise. What do you need to be able to do? You've got to de-risk yourself. You've got to show people that you're not a risk. Now, what I'll point out just as kind of a high level, remember, there's three types of risk. There's individual risk, there's risk to the program, and then there's overall corporate risk. You've got to remember to appeal on all levels. You might look great and make a case, this is going to help your organization. Okay, but now do they have the budget for it, and are they willing to go ask for the funding for it? Right, and those are two different challenges. But at that bottom level, that person going and making that ask, are you going to make them look like a fool? Or are they going to come back and say, man, it was a great decision that I did? And so that's kind of what this is talking about, right? What's your quality? What's the risk of your team? What's your sales risk? What's your market risk? What's your funding risk? What's your competition risk? And I think that as we figure that out, it does a lot better. How do you handle this, Paul?
I think it's different depending on the industry that you're in and the product that you're providing in a huge, huge way. However, I agree with those fundamental principles. So I guess I'll name names, right? So in my own experience, when you're in enterprise software, for example, right, there are technologies that are going to be super critical to your business. A firewall, for example, right? That thing goes down, like bad things happen. But then there are monitoring services that you can implement and test out that, yeah, they're critical to operations, but your phone's not ringing off the hook and the business isn't necessarily going to lose a ton of money if it goes wrong. So consider that as a buyer, like where you can be a little more risky in that sense. And I think in my own experience being a consumer of products from startups and in smaller companies, it depends on how widespread usage it's going to receive in the organization. My personal laptop decision, sure, that carries some risk. If I can't work, that's kind of a big deal. And if I'm fighting with things and not working, that's kind of a big deal. The software that we use, it plays into the whole team. If I bring software in and it starts falling down flat on its face, yeah, I'm going to look bad. So that definitely plays into the risk factor. So there are technologies that we use here, like a help desk ticketing system. Calendly is one of them, which I can speak very positive to, Michael. I think you were absolutely right with Calendly. Really, really love that organization and their product. There are some other companies that I think show promise, but I'm holding off on because right now it's just too risky. The Front app is one of them. I think they show tremendous promise, enough so that my risk decision there is I'm not going to implement them today, but I want to spend some more time with them and understand their product and where they're going, because I think it has a really high degree of potential success to help my business. So I kind of put companies in different categories and weigh the risk. That's how I weigh the risk as a consumer anyway.
No, I like it. And here's the thing that I'm picking up listening to you too and listening to Tyler talk about this stuff when we're talking about risk. There's got to be a story to it. And what I find is that you come to this point where, okay, I've got this new idea, you can get some buzz around it, and a couple of the early adopters hop in, and their chances are going to be people you already know. They've already worked with you, they're following whatever you're doing out of just pure curiosity or what have you. And then you're like, okay, I'm ready for prime time. And you've probably come up against this, well, give us a story of where it works. And sometimes they'll say story, or who else has this worked with, or how has it worked, right? They'll ask those questions. Those are great questions. And what's happening is they don't necessarily have the imagination to look at what you're telling them and translate it into their own environment. So kind of like you're describing with Front. I think it will work. I mean, I see some signs here. I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. So you're gonna hesitate a little bit, which is a prudent and a good action. And I don't mean that not having that vision is good or bad. I mean, some people can read a blueprint and see what it looks like, and some people, not a shot. They're both good people. It's just a function of being able to do it. What happens, though, is if you find yourself in that situation and you're trying to de-risk, you need to go look. What I liked about this article is that it gives you a number of dimensions to look at and a scale, and then some advice at the end. If you've got something that's more in the yellow zone, focus on getting that to green as opposed to making your greens bigger green or better green. And that's a really good point. But the answer is really going to be give people the scenarios that they can relate to, show them, bring their world into yours or vice versa, and give them what they need. And I think you put yourself in some pretty good shape. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good way to look at it. What do you think about startup boards, Paul?
What's a startup board?
Board of directors.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I haven't really gone into that realm yet. I think at least what my strategy is on that today is I'm keeping it very informal with thinking about in the future what that might look like. But I think it's different. I don't know. I feel like it's different for someone who's been in an industry for a while and does a startup. They have resources at their disposal, may not necessarily need a board, a formal board in the beginning, as you can get a lot of great advice and direction from your peers. But I do believe that you will progress to a point where a formal board is a thing that hopefully can help you. Although, of course, it can go south depending on how you structure it. The board could vote you out, if they're shareholders. But
yeah, so there's an article that was in TechCrunch, and I threw it up because it was good. I do a lot more work with boards now, and I have now some publicly facing board experience, and it's interesting. I mean, you learn a lot. Like, you think you know what it's like to be on a board until you're actually on a board, and then you realize, well, I've got some responsibility here. I'm going to say something leading into this I think is really important. A lot of us don't understand what a board is. Boards are for governance. They're for oversight. And they're not the administration. So what I see happen a lot of times is people in security in specific, but even when you're looking at startups, like you're expecting the board to be very active and to manage and to micromanage and to do the administration. That's not the job of the board. That's the job of the board is to make sure that you're heading in the right direction, to make sure that the funding is there, that it's allocated properly, and that your officers work. So like on the board that I'm on, we actually only have a contract with one person. The chief administrator. We have one contract. Now that person's responsible for putting in the work agreements with everybody else, and is always welcome to consult with us as a board on any of those hiring and firing decisions or what have you. But we only have one person that we have a contract with, and you'll find a lot of places are structured that way. So to your point, the board could eventually, vote you off the island or whatnot, but they're there. So a lot of people, and there's a couple of parts that I really liked about this that I wanted to point out. One of them said, okay, well, who's on the board and does it matter? And it said, look, it's going to evolve. Based on where you are as a stage of company, it's going to particularly matter. And typically, like if you do a seed round, you're going to give up a board seat. If you do another round or two, you're going to give up, each of the lead investors tends to take a board seat. There's an interesting thing there. People say, oh, that's so they can protect their investment. No. Believe it or not, it's so they can protect everybody's investment. Like their job on that board then is to use their collective experience and knowledge to say, are we making the right decisions? And do I have confidence that the executive team is doing what's in the best interest of this organization for the shareholders? Are you returning the value that we expect to see? Now, it's not a contentious relationship. It doesn't have to be, at least. But it's interesting because if you talk to some CEOs of startups, they'll say, well, I've got 7 board members, and it's like having 7 different bosses, and I don't know which one to keep happy. Right. And I think I think it's a true statement. And it's just kind of interesting. Like, I think it's smart on your part to take your time building a board and working with advisors, formal and informal and whatnot. But part of the other reason I like sharing stuff like this is we're starting to see more folks in our industry talk about, well, if we just had more security people on the board, it'd be better. Absolutely agreed. But remember, your job then isn't to say, well, which firewall did you use? And like if you have that privilege of serving on a board where you have actual fiduciary responsibility, knowing security is going to be really useful. But I think I've mentioned this, maybe not on this program before. I have advocated with my fellow board members against some security initiatives because I didn't think they were the right choice for the company. They weren't the right direction to go. So what I'm pointing out is that if you're a startup, take your time building your board, be thoughtful about it. if you're looking at startups and thinking, oh, I totally want to be on that board, I'm going to show them how to do it right, recalibrate what your role is going to be. And if you get the opportunity to work with boards in other places, remember, it's you've got to look at what's overall health and good, and for the proper welfare of the organization to return value to the shareholders, not to micromanage the company. It's a different setup. So I just wanted to put that out there for people to think about it a little bit differently.
Hey, Michael, can we talk about my laptop purchase a little bit, because I think it's relevant to
I would love to
discussion. And I'm not quite ready to put my full recommendation behind this company. It's System 76. Excuse me. And they make Linux laptops, and in fact, in our community, they got some pretty decent reviews from a lot of my peers. And I put together a laptop largely because I was frustrated with the other options that were available to me. And so I put it together, and yeah, they made a mistake in shipping, but yeah, I understand people make mistakes, companies make mistakes, and it was how they dealt with it that was really important to me, and I thought they dealt with it really well. It did impact my ability to use it in a timely manner. However, like I said, they dealt with it well. And it seemed to me, in talking about customer service, they put a lot of focus on their customer service platform and response, in that what I really liked, and I had never seen this before, when you order a laptop and interact with the System 76, you get a ticket that's automatically created with your order, and it goes in their ticketing system. And when you go to your order, you don't have to send them an email or click a button and fill out a form. Basically, underneath your order, it reads like a chat. There's an automatic ticket, and it's like a chat. And any other ticket that's opened when you go to the ticket, you can add attachments and comments, and people respond right back to you. And it's like a mini chat session on their website for every ticket and every order that you place with them. And I thought about it. I'm like, wow, number one, that shows a real dedication to customer service. Number two, that's a pretty big investment in technology to pull that off, because I used it pretty extensively, and it worked really well. I was uploading pictures of what they sent me, and they were responding right back to me. One of the technicians saw a cigar paraphernalia or something in my picture and was like, "Oh, I like to smoke cigars. I like that you had cigars in your picture." And I told him about the Stogie Geeks podcast. And he's like, "Oh, I'm totally going to check that out." It was like having a conversation with him, in this chat thing. But that's a real dedication to the technology. It's an investment in it that I thought, for a small company, was an interesting decision and something to think about if you're doing your own startup.
No, I liked it. And bringing it up, Crutchfield.com. Their customer service is dialed in, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all that type of stuff. No, I think it's good. I've enjoyed it. I put a couple more stories up. We don't have to get into them, but I put up one I just want to call out about making decisions, and how to take the courage to do it. This is about the boldness of making decisions. Those are some of the things I'm starting to focus on more, because I find a lot of people, they waffle. They don't have a system for making the decisions. They don't have a system for doing these different types of things. And if you want to be a high performer at your startup or in your organization today, you need to be able to do that. How are we haven't talked about our journeys in a bit. How are things going on your end there?
Things are going well. We're continuing to gain some micro focus into some of our very early stage customers, take care of them, give them a lot of hand-holding, a lot of demos, a lot of support, a lot of contact, which I think is an important, great focus for us. The work on the new interface is definitely coming along. It's looking great. We're looking at maybe implementing. So I apologize. I have had a cold all week, as Michael and I were talking about before the show. But we've made this interesting crossroads that we're at, to be able to say, do we want to play in a slightly different space? And I was like, well, there's no way we can take on doing another product. I'm like, what if we're actually looking at a company that was playing in a space and not doing so well, actually not being able to pay back their investors. And we're like, if we were able to build some of those features into our product? And I think now we're kind of struggling with how to prioritize that to be able to expand our market a little bit and use some of the advanced research and expertise we have on our team to be able to play in a slightly more expanded market, which is kind of an interesting decision for us. So we'll see how that pans out.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, actually. offline, I will show you some ways that you can use Straight Talk to do that analysis, and I will help you with it. And I'll show you how it works. I did that with somebody this week, actually. So this will be a good segue for me. I keep pivoting, and that's part of why I was asking Tyler about like how fast do you need to pivot, because and what I've kind of come to in my own is I started out thinking I was solving a specific challenge. And I'll be blunt. I thought I was helping people solve a challenge around getting recognized for their leadership. I don't think anybody is incapable of leadership. So I appreciate if you're working with me, you're probably a leader. What I found is two things. One, people don't really value leadership development and communication. It sounds important to us, and so we'll say it's interesting. But most of our experiences around it have just been so horrible. It's like, yeah, okay, it sounds good. I like what you're doing. It sounds really good, and maybe we'll try to get to it. So what I was trying to do is show people how they can solve problems so they be recognized for their leadership, and it's useful. But what I learned coming out of the first cohort was that a lot of people were more interested in, no, you helped me clarify my focus. You helped me prioritize action, and you gave me confidence to take those next steps. That language resonates with people so much more powerfully. So we still do leadership stuff. Now, what's interesting is because I spent time talking about leadership, people are like, oh, this is just for executives. What do I do with my team? No. So one of the things that I've pivoted on just since you and I last talked, I rolled out a beta of a team program, and I've kept it open. So I've lengthened out the cohort, and it's open to teams as long as they get in by Thanksgiving. And I've only got like 1 or 2 slots left, so it's kind of cool. And the idea was, let's not worry about leadership and communication by itself. Let's go talk about the problem you're trying to solve. Let me show you how to use Straight Talk as a system for your success. Let me show you how, as a team, you're going to solve that. But oh, by the way, because a lot of team training, sometimes it works for everybody, but it doesn't normally. And a lot of individual training doesn't always scale up. Why don't we do both in parallel? So what I've started to do now is work with teams and say, here, let's go solve this problem. And along the way, we're going to do some training and we're going to do some coaching, and we're going to get you to a much better place. And yeah, that's working. Like I'm really kind of jazzed up with it, and it's really helped me start to wrap my head around the way it goes. Now, what's interesting is as you're talking about how to kind of expand, I'm finding 2 things are happening to me related, and it's kind of mind-blowing. I'm getting simpler and simpler and simpler. I had some stuff I wanted to do, and I was thinking, oh, can I get this done by the end of the year? Nope. I'm going to do it next year. In fact, I'm not even going to touch it until after April. I've got some stuff planned, and we're going to be together in InfoSec World. I get back from that. Kids have a week off. Cool. After that, I will figure out the timing. Until then, I have one focus. It's this experience, working with teams to solve their pressing issue, but elevating the performance of the whole team. That's it. That's my only focus. I'm going to do that better than everybody else. My content marketing, everything, that's going to be totally focused on that. Oh, by the way, though, when I get that right, that just opened me up to a whole bigger thing too, right? So it's kind of like one of those, sometimes if you focus on something really well, and you can solve it. Because one of the things I like, and I love it when people say this to me, they'll say, Michael, wait, so you're helping the security team, but you're not really solving a security problem. Like, no, guys, I got 20 years of security experience. We talk about anything you want. But the problems we face in security today, they're not, look, the problems startups face today, very seldom are they actual challenges around the technology itself. It's around, does it fit? Is it the right time? Are we ready for it? And which one should I do first? And how do I get other people to come with us on the journey? That's it. Hey, if you can solve that, boom, we're good. So I find myself in an oddly excited place where it's like, hey, I can do one thing and I can focus on this and I can have these great conversations. We're going to go make a huge difference. Cool. So that's it. That's my focus for the year, and it's next year as well. So that's the update. It's been good. Like, and I'm loving the guests that we're having. It's validating both of us. We're getting good feedback from it. If you're watching, we got guests lined up for the rest of the year. Let us know who else you'd like to hear from, or let us know the challenges that you're trying to solve. Right? We're picking things based on our own experience, or things. I'm getting better now at picking things that I think are generically interesting based on what I'm hearing from people. If you got something you want us to talk about, shoot it in. We'll tackle it. We'll happily do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Thanks to our special guest, Tyler Shields from Signal Sciences Corporation. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll see everyone on the next episode of Startup Security Weekly.